In this video series, I'm going to share with you the basics of pen making and what you need to get started. So the first topic I'm going to cover is the different types of pens. Before you can make anything, you probably should decide what you want to make and what you want it to look like. So what I've done is set out a few different styles here, and I'm going to go over each one pretty quickly. The first and one of the most popular for a beginner is called a Slimline. Basically, it is just what the name says. It's a small, slim pen, probably the most common pen you'll see from pen makers. And it's available in a variety of colors on the finish, different finishes, and then of course, what you're making, the middle here, you can do anything you want with. Probably the second pen I went to after the Slimline, and I think it's pretty popular for beginners, is the cigar type. The reason it's called a cigar, it doesn't look like a cigar necessarily, it's more the size of it. It's a very fat pen. It's a nice pen to turn when you're a beginner because you got a little more meat on the tube. You can see the difference between a Slimline and a cigar pen. You get a little more to do here. The next style is this one piece that goes by many names. I've seen it called Wall Street, Wall Street 2, Sierra. I think they even call it the Gatsby. There's a ton of different names. Basically, they're all the same pen because they are all based on the same measurements of the tube. Now, of course, when you do that, you're going to want to stick to the bushings that are from that manufacturer for the pen you're going to turn. Again, this is a nice choice because it's one piece that you're making, although this pen tends to be a little thin at the bushing points, so it is a little more delicate in that sense. After those first three, the sky's the limit. There's a ton of different kits out there. You can do everything you want with them, basically. You can use all the parts, you can use not all the parts. This is a rather large capped pen, and what you can see is it happens to be a roller ball, but in comparison, same style capped pen. This one I didn't use the end. I just made the wood rounded and I did that end. It's called a closed end, which we'll get to in advanced pen making. But it just shows you the options that are out there. There's a lot of kits out there, so make sure you don't go crazy and get 20 different kits, because with each kit you're going to need bushings, extra tubes, and various things. So when you're first starting out, I'd stick with maybe the Slimline and the cigar, get good at those, and then you can progress on. So now that you have your kit, what do you need? You need your pen blank. It needs to be wood or acrylic. I would say stick with wood until you're very comfortable turning and comfortable making pens, because it is a different type of turning. It's very small and very thin. I would start with Cocobolo. It's a great wood to turn. It's very hard. It takes a nice finish. I have very few blowouts on this stuff, and quite frankly, it's darn right good looking almost all the time. The beauty of this stuff is you can take a block that doesn't look like much, turn it, and it'll come out just stunning because of the grain and the streaks that are in it and all that. Another one is Bacote. It's another hardwood, desert hardwood. It's real easy to turn, it sands nicely, and it takes on a nice finish. Now if you want to jump right into acrylics, again, sky's the limit. Everybody makes them. Every company makes them. There's people making them in their garages. You can get any combination of colors and styles you want. Basically, it's just resin or plastic, whatever you want to call it. People swirl it, they mix it in different fashions, and you just come out with a pen blank the same size. Sometimes these are made in big sheets and then cut into pieces that are 3/4 by 3/4. Sometimes they're in round molds or round-like molds, and they just pop them out. So be careful with these when you're first starting. They are a little more temperamental than wood, but another easy way to start. So once you decided what pen you're going to make, you're going to buy a pen kit. You can get these a lot of places. Woodcraft, Rockler, a lot of wood stores will have them. Maybe even your local wood store, I don't know. But you can also get a huge variety online. There's some very reputable places online. Stick with those. Stick with name brand kits, that way you know what you're getting. If you venture into the really cheap kits, you do have issues with sizing and fitting and things like that. You hate to go to all that work and then have it not fit. But basically you want to know what's in a pen kit. So inside of every pen kit are the same basic components. You're going to start off, you're going to have your tubes. These are what you're going to build the pen around. You're of course going to have ink, Not always the best quality, so down the road you're going to want to look into getting some upgraded ink so that you have smooth writing pens. You want them to look good as well as write good. You're going to have a tip, you're going to have an end cap, and in some cases, depending on a 2-piece or a 1-piece, you're going to have a center and of course a transmission. Now this happens to be a cigar pen kit, so how this would go together is once you turn it, your tip would go on the front, of course. On the back would be your transmission assembly. On the upper part of the pen, the cap, you would first have the cap end like that, and then the clip end would press into this. Now the whole thing would have the ink inside, which you can thread this off. The ink inside, once everything's pressed together, you just simply slide the cap over the end. I'll go into more detail on this when we actually make a cigar pen in one of the episodes. So this is my lathe setup for pen making. That's pretty much all I do here. Everything I've done is to set up for pen making and to make it easier. You can see I've got the lathe. Right behind it quick, I've got a stop to stop any splashing or dust if possible. There's a little shelf that holds sandpaper and micro mesh, which we'll get into later. And then up here, I don't know if you can see it, is a chisel rack. That's where I keep everything, and then all my centers and jaw chucks and things like that over there. That's really all I use tool-wise. This is the whole setup. So to start pen making, everything is built around this mandrel. This is a 7mm mandrel, has a Morse taper that fits into the lathe, and everything slides onto here. This is where you do your turning, your sanding, and ultimately your finishing. You can support this one of 2 ways. This is a live center where it actually just pushes in. You would thread a nut onto your mandrel to hold your workpiece in place. But what I've actually started to use is this, and it's called a mandrel saver. I think they're sold in a couple of different places. And basically what this is this goes in your other end in your tailstock, and it actually slides right up to the workpiece. And it can slide up, on a small piece because it's an open end. And how this works is you tighten this up, and this is it. You don't use the nut, there's no other fasteners, just the pressure from your tailstock pushing on that workpiece. Great way to save your mandrel. Also, I find it's much quicker than unthreading and finding spacers and other things with the standard nut on the mandrel. So when you first start out, probably 3 basic chisels you'll need. First, a roughing gouge. You'll use this a lot. This will be to take the bulk of the material off the workpiece when you're first turning it. Then a smaller gouge and a skew. This will be your final shaping. I use these to cut the ends a lot to make them nice and smooth. But those are the 3 basic chisels you'll need. If you just had 2 or 2, you can definitely get away with it and you'll be just fine. Just might take you a little more time. So the last tool you'll need to get, and this is pretty essential in my eyes, I definitely tried to get away with not having it in the beginning, is a pen end mill. And what this is a cutter that goes into the tube to clear the tube if anything is in there. But the most important part is this end mill, where you'll have either 4 or 6 blades. And basically, I put this in the drill press once I have my tube glued in. And as this comes down, it'll cut away and basically cut up to the pen tube. So you'll have a perfectly square to the tube blank. So even if you drilled your hole a little crooked or it was a little off center, doesn't matter. As long as you use something like this, you're going to cut that nice and square and start with a fresh square piece when you start turning. So that was a lot of information in a short amount of time. In the next episode, I'm going to turn a complete Slimline pen from start to finish. That way you get to see every step of the process. After that, I'm going to go ahead and do a cigar pen so you get to see every step of that process. Down the road, we'll look at some advanced techniques. You want to be very careful. Pen turning can become quite addictive like any hobby, and your pen blanks will grow and grow and grow. In my workbench, there's 2 4-foot drawers that were specifically made to hold pen blanks. This is one of them. Keep in mind, behind that second row, there's a third row. I just can't pull it all the way out. But there's 2 of these. So just pace yourself. You don't need to go crazy right away.